This fight right here was one of my most satisfying online victories. I was playing as Chris Weidman, the other guy chose to play as John Jones, and it was more or less a back and forth fight at first. I believe we were both like purple belt ranked, so more or less we both knew what we were doing. We knew how to defend things, and we knew how to attack. It was back and forth, and it really, for Chris Weidman against John Jones, it's an uphill battle. John Jones is taller, he has better reach, he's a weight class higher, and he has more dynamic kicks. I think the only thing Chris Weidman's better at in terms of stand-up is just raw KO power. So it was an uphill battle for me, but until I actually hurt John Jones's head. And once his head was hurt, it was all over. I mean, I kept targeting him in the face, and I scored just a beautiful KO knockout. I've had knockouts that were far more beautiful. I've had fights that were far more impressive. But there was just something about Chris Weidman KOing John Jones that warmed my cockles, if you will. This is the game in a nutshell. It has beautiful graphics, it has a ton of strategy, and it's just a load of fun to play for MMA enthusiasts. Look at Weidman's face. That's like struggling in the bathroom face. Now, of course, fighting mid-skill level players online isn't how my journey with EA UFC began. No, I needed a little practice at first, of course, so I started up the career mode. I created myself in the game, or as much as I could make the character look like myself. I got the body more or less down, except my character has a really fat neck, a big fat judo-like wrestling neck, which I just don't have. And also, I couldn't get my reach down. I created myself as a welterweight, and for some reason, my reach was automatically, the game made my reach 68, but I guess I have more like a gorilla physique in real life, where in real life my reach is more like 74 with my height, which is about 5'11". Now, the game was a struggle at first. There's a lot to get through. Even with the comprehensive tutorials, there's just a lot of, let's say, on-the-job training involved. You can go through all the tutorials, and I did go through about 45 minutes of tutorials before I went to my first match, and I still didn't know much. A lot of this game will be learning as you fight in the fight. So I started up in the Ultimate Fighter house, and I progressed by basically beating up jobbers. Well, actually, it was more like they were beating me, and I had to restart over and over until I actually took the jobbers to a decision. But that all changed as I started to level up my ranks. The first thing I did was just make my kicks really powerful, so I could just KO guys in the ring. Even if I was fighting someone who's a lot better than me, I would just kind of block and just keep throwing leg kicks. And most of the time this worked, where even though I was getting my ass kicked, I would just score a flash KO, or I just hurt his head and then continue on with a TKO. But then I got good, and I actually started to use various strategies in the game, and I stopped being one of those fighters who pray for one lucky punch to turn the entire match around. And that's what the game wants you to do. It wants you to get so good you actually fight like a real MMA fighter. This is ultimately not an arcade fighting game. This is an MMA simulation. For the most part, it's a good simulation. Everything is fantastic, from the ground game to the beautiful stand-up. I mean, that's actually, when I play online, that's all I want to do is the stand-up. Whenever somebody tries to take me down, I get right back up, or I just don't let them take me down. Just because the stand-up is so beautiful and fun. After every powerful punch, the guy's face changes, he winces when you hit him really hard. There's a skin vibration when the punch lands. I mean, the game is just so next-gen and beautiful. All I can do for EA is stand up and give them a round of applause, because this is what next-gen is supposed to look like. So I kept getting better, going through the career mode, winning fights, training in between fights, which actually gets kind of annoying because you're repeating the same training over and over. It's actually kind of good in the beginning because it's just another chance to learn the game fight mechanics, but after a while, after you actually learn most of the game, you don't really need to keep doing it. You're only really doing it to get points to level up your character, but once you actually level up all the stats you need and you don't need to keep leveling your character, you can just skip skipped the training altogether. So I basically kept winning fights. I think I had like a 15-0 record, and keep in mind I was playing on hard difficulty without ever trying the game before. I finally got my title shot. It was against Carlos Condit, and boy was he out of my league. I mean, he absolutely murdered me with head kicks. He just had me rocked like 3 times in the fight and just finished me. It was a wake-up call. I thought I was good with my 15-0 record, but for the most part, all those 15 wins were just fighting jobbers and 1 or 2 good fighters in the UFC like Robbie Lawler. I love the game's difficulty. I love the challenge because it's a challenge of your skill. It's not a challenge of your patience. In this game, if you're good, you will succeed. If you're not paying attention, if you're just throwing punches willy-nilly, you will more often than not lose the fight. I would say the most important thing in this game in terms of strategy is stamina management. When you have stamina, your punches are harder, you're faster, and there's a much smaller chance of you getting rocked. Some of the more scrubbier guys online in like white belt levels, they will just have no idea what they're doing. They'll keep throwing punches like madmen. They're gonna wear themselves out, and then you can more or less just KO them with 1 punch. I can't tell you how many times I've had fights like this. This is a great improvement from the last UFC game, UFC 3, where for the most part, 95% of the fights I had online were not in a realistic simulation. They were more like arcade-type fights where the stamina just didn't go down. I mean, you could throw 50 punches and kicks in a row and your stamina was fine. You were basically fighting like the Energizer Bunny. Here, the default, and as far as I know, the only option is to fight with a realistic stamina bar, which is perfect for me and anyone else who likes fighting simulations and not arcade fighters. Another thing I really love that they updated in this game is the fact that there's so few ways to be cheap. Like, obviously, the computers that where you fight on in single player aren't going to be cheap, but the truth is, this game wasn't made for single player. Aside from the career mode, there's really not much more to do in single player. EA UFC is a game made specifically for online combat, testing your MMA gaming skills against people around the world. In the last incarnations of UFC games, there were a lot of ways to be cheap. Like, in the first game, I think it's like UFC 2009 or something, people used turbo controllers, and it was just so easy to submit someone by holding down the turbo button and basically powering up an unstoppable submission attempt. In the last UFC game, I think UFC 3, the cheapest way was throws and the ground game. Everyone at the highest level in UFC 3 would just grab each other, throw each other down, and then pound each other out on the ground. And if they did it right, there was no way to escape. In this game, it's so easy to just get right back up from the ground. It's basically, in most positions, it's as easy as just pressing the L3 button, you know, the left trigger. I hope that's what it's called. I don't know. Who cares? I've been fighting too much. I've had too many concussions. I don't remember what the buttons are called. And it's the same thing in the clinch. You can't be cheap in the clinch. A guy can keep clinching you all he wants. You could just block and just push him away after a little while. You just have to time it right. With takedowns and throws, it's the same thing. A guy can take you down a lot, but it doesn't matter because you can just get right back up, and the takedowns don't really hurt you that much. Even the powerful like slam takedowns, which by the way are a little ridiculous, where like I've had online fights where a guy would just slam me like 5 times in a row. A guy who's not even a wrestler. Like, I believe one time I got slammed by like Carlos Condit. It's like everyone has the wrestling ability of Khabib Nurmagomedov in this game. It's ridiculous. But like I said, they can take you down all they want. If you don't want to play on the ground, it's easy to get up if you know what you're doing, or even if you halfway know what you're doing. The submissions can get a bit confusing. I actually would have preferred if they carried over the submission physics from the last game, UFC 3, because it was more or less perfect in the last game. I don't see why they needed to change it or make a whole new system altogether. An unrealistic arcade part of this game is like extravagant crazy kicks. It's the same thing as the crazy slams. A character can perform these crazy, intricate capoeira, spinning, jumping ninja kicks, and they can keep doing that over and over in the fight and landing flush in the face. face. It's like these are fights MMA fighters sometimes land with when the other guy is not expecting it, maybe like in the third round. But in this game, you just keep landing these kicks over and over and over, and you don't really get too tired from throwing them, or not as much as you should. I would love to see some kind of update where these kicks cost like twice as much energy as they do right now. I've been talking a lot, and I hope this review was somewhat comprehensive about this game. At least more comprehensive than most reviews you've seen of the game. But the truth is, the game is way too complex for just one review. In the coming days, I will be uploading gameplay footage of me fighting various people online, and I will be doing color commentary for those fights, and hopefully that gives you an even better idea of what this game is. And I realize MMA games are a niche market, but if you're a fan of realistic fighting games, this is so far the best one I've played in my life. Oh, yeah, they also they put Bruce Lee into the game to attract more casual players, I guess, which is I don't care about it, but it's actually good for me. The more casual players I meet online, the easier my online experience will be. Thanks for watching. Goodbye, my friends.